James stood in the corner of the space station's common area, his eyes wandering over the crowd. The station, a floating city on the edge of human territory, was mostly filled with workers, scientists, and soldiers. Wasn't the most exciting place to be, and James couldn't help but feel the weight of the isolation. Life here was dull, routine, and far from the excitement he had dreamed of when he first joined the space program. Another day of nothing. James muttered to himself as he took a sip of his drink. His friends, a small group of humans stationed here, sat at a nearby table, chatting about their daily duties. They were used to the quiet, but James wasn't. He missed the buzz of a lively city, the laughter of friends, and the thrill of the unknown. Trying to lighten the mood, James called out across the room, "Hey, if I get a ring, do I get to marry a woman as beautiful as her?" He gestured jokingly toward the striking figure standing across the room. She was tall, with pale skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light of the station. Her eyes were a bright, glowing red, and her dark, flowing hair seemed to move with a life of its own. She was stunning, unlike any woman James had ever seen. And his comment was just a silly attempt to break the monotony. The group of friends at his table chuckled. James could tell they didn't take the joke seriously. What were the odds that someone like her would even look in his direction? She was an alien, a species James had never encountered before, and her presence on the station was unusual. The station had never seen many aliens, especially not ones as intense as her. But then, something strange happened. The woman, who had been standing quietly near the wall, turned toward him. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, the air seemed to freeze. James's heart skipped a beat. It was as though time had slowed down. There was no mistaking it. She was staring directly at him. Did I just offend her? James thought, feeling a rush of panic. He quickly looked away, trying to hide the nervousness that was creeping up his spine. His friends fell silent, sensing the shift in the air. They all turned to look at the woman. To James's shock, she started walking toward him. The sound of her footsteps echoed in the quiet room, drawing the attention of everyone around them. Each step seemed calculated, precise, like a predator stalking its prey. Her gaze never left him, and the closer she got, the more intense her presence felt. Hey, sorry, I didn't mean anything by that." James stammered, his usual confidence evaporating as she approached. She stopped in front of him, towering over him by a few inches. Her eyes were no longer just glowing, they were almost hypnotic, like two pools of red light drawing him in. James found himself unable to look away. The woman tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. For a moment, it seemed like she was studying him, analyzing him as though he were some sort of specimen. Then, in a voice that was smooth and icy, she spoke. "I'll take you as my mate." The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the world around James seemed to disappear. The room was silent. His friends didn't laugh. They didn't speak. They just stared, their mouths agape. James blinked several times, trying to process what had just happened.
"Wait, what?" he asked, his
voice shaky. He couldn't believe his ears. This had to be a joke, right? He must have misunderstood her. But no, she was standing right there, looking at him with that same unwavering gaze. "I will take you as my mate," she repeated, her tone final, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. James's mind raced. He didn't know what to do. This was insane. He'd made a joke, and now an alien woman was claiming him as her mate. It didn't make sense. He tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe she was playing along. But the look in her eyes told him this was no joke. His friends shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of what to do. Some of them were whispering to each other, while others just stared, trying to process the scene unfolding before them. James could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. "I don't know what to say," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "I was just kidding." But the woman didn't laugh. Her eyes remained fixed on him, and James could feel the tension building. There was something serious in her words, something he couldn't ignore. "I do not joke," she said, her voice calm yet intense. I take you as my mate, or you face the consequences. James's stomach turned. The woman's presence was both captivating and terrifying. He had no idea who she was or what she wanted, but it was clear now that he was in a situation far more complicated than a simple joke. James stood frozen, his mind racing as the alien woman's words echoed in his ears. I'll take you as my mate. Her voice was cold, yet there was a strange power in it. He had made a joke, a casual remark, but it seemed like she wasn't laughing. She wasn't joking at all. The room felt suffocating, and for a moment, James wondered if he had imagined the whole thing. Maybe he had misheard her. He glanced at his friends, hoping they'd say something, anything, that would make this moment feel less real. But they were just as stunned as he was. No one moved, and no one spoke. The silence was unbearable. I don't understand, James finally managed to say. His voice was shaky, and his palms were beginning to sweat. This is a joke, right? Alien woman didn't smile or show any signs of amusement. She simply stood there, looking at him with those intense, glowing eyes. The red light in her eyes seemed to grow brighter, and James felt a strange pressure in his chest. It was as if her gaze was pushing him to respond, to make a choice. I do not joke, she said again. Her voice steady and unyielding. I take you as my mate, or you will face the consequences. She tilted her head slightly, as though waiting for him to understand the seriousness of her words. James blinked, his mind still trying to process what was happening. He looked around at his friends, hoping one of them would step in and tell him that this was all just some weird misunderstanding. But they were all too scared to speak, too shocked by the situation. What? What do you mean by consequences? James asked, his heart racing. He tried to laugh, but the sound caught in his throat. This wasn't funny anymore. This was serious, and it was happening to him. The alien woman didn't answer immediately. Instead, she took a step closer to him, her eyes never leaving his face. James instinctively took a small step back, but she didn't stop. She kept moving until she was standing just inches away. James could feel the heat of her presence. Even though the station was cool and sterile, "You are not familiar with my kind," she said. Her voice was softer now, but there was still an edge to it. "We do not take rejection lightly. When we choose a mate, we claim them. You will either accept me, or you will regret it." James felt a chill run down his spine. He had heard of alien species with strange customs, but this was different. He had never imagined something like this would happen to him. He had thought he was just joking around, but now it felt like he was caught in a trap with no way out. I don't even know your name," James said, his voice barely a whisper. "How can I just accept you like this?" The woman paused for a moment, as if considering his question. Then, with a smooth, almost effortless movement, she reached out and gently touched his arm. James flinched at the sudden contact, but her touch was surprisingly warm. "My name is Rena," she said, her voice low, "and I have chosen you. You may not understand, but you will come to realize that this is fate. My people have been watching your species for some time. We know that humans are strong, resilient, and adaptable. You are not like the others. I chose you because you are different." James felt a knot form in his stomach. The words she spoke were strange and cryptic. What did she mean by my people, and why had she chosen him? He wasn't special. He was just a regular guy, stuck on a space station, just trying to make it through each day. "I don't even know what you want from me," James said, his voice shaking. "Didn't ask for any of this." Rena's eyes softened for a brief moment, and she stepped back slightly. "You do not need to ask. I have already chosen, and once you accept, you will understand. There is no turning back now." James swallowed hard, feeling trapped in a situation he didn't know how to handle. He had been hoping for a simple, easy life, but now everything seemed so complicated. An alien vampire woman had just walked into his life and was claiming him. As her mate, he couldn't just ignore it, couldn't pretend it wasn't happening. "What happens if I say no?" James asked, his voice barely audible. Rena's expression didn't change, but the air around them seemed to grow colder. "If you reject me, there will be consequences. But I will give you a chance to prove yourself. A challenge. If you succeed, I will leave you in peace." If you fail, ... She didn't finish the sentence, but the meaning was clear. There would be no peace if he refused her. James could feel his heart pounding in his chest. He didn't want to get involved in some alien conflict, but he also didn't want to risk his life. What kind of challenge? James asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Rena looked at him for a moment, her gaze unblinking. Test of your strength, your will, your ability to adapt to the unknown. James felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had no idea what she meant by that. But he knew one thing for sure. His life would never be the same again. James sat quietly in his small room on the space station, staring at the blank wall in front of him. His mind was still racing, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. Just a few hours ago, he had made a joke, and now he was caught in the middle of an alien's strange proposal. Rena, the alien vampire woman, had claimed him as her mate, and now he was faced with the challenge of proving himself worthy. He couldn't stop thinking about her words. A test of your strength, your will, your ability to adapt to the unknown. What kind of test was she talking about? Why had she chosen him? There were hundreds, maybe thousands, of other people on the station. Why him? James ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He had always been a man of reason, someone who liked things to make sense. But this was beyond anything he could have imagined. How was he supposed to deal with an alien who could make demands like this? A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. He froze, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew exactly who it was before the door even opened. Rena? James. Her voice came from the other side. It was calm, but there was an underlying command in it. It is time to begin. James stood up, feeling a sense of dread settle in his stomach. He opened the door, and there she was, Rena, standing tall and confident. Her red eyes glowed in the dim light of the hallway, and her presence was as powerful as ever. She looked at him without saying a word, but he could see that she was waiting for him to follow. He stepped out into the hallway, and the door slid shut behind him. Rena led him down the narrow corridor of the space station. It was quiet, the only sound being their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. James couldn't help but feel like he was walking toward something he couldn't control. His instincts were screaming at him to turn back, but he had no idea where to go or what to do. There was no escaping this. Rena didn't look back at him as she walked. You will be tested in the arena, she said, her voice clear and steady. There you will face challenges designed to test your strength, your courage, and your loyalty. James felt his throat dry up. An arena? What kind of arena was she talking about? He couldn't imagine what kind of tests she had in mind, but he had a sinking feeling that it wouldn't be easy. He was no fighter. He wasn't sure if he was ready to face whatever lay ahead. They arrived at a large door at the end of the hall, which slid open with a soft hiss. James stepped inside, his eyes widening as he took in the sight before him. The room was vast, with high arched ceilings and walls lined with strange symbols and markings. In the center of the room was a raised platform, surrounded by a glowing energy field. It looked like something out of a science fiction movie, a place for warriors to fight. It's for tests to be completed. This is the arena, Rena said, her voice echoing off the walls. Here, you will face your challenges. There is no turning back now. James swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath. He didn't know what he was getting himself into, but he knew one thing for sure. He couldn't back out now. He had no choice but to go forward and face whatever came next. Rena stepped onto the platform and turned to face him. The first test will be a trial of strength, she said. You will fight against the creatures of my world, creatures that are stronger than anything you've encountered. You must defeat them to prove your worth. James stared at her, his mind racing. Creatures. What kind of creatures was she talking about? He wasn't prepared for this. He was just a man who had been making jokes and trying to pass the time. On a lonely space station. Now he was supposed to fight aliens? Before he could say anything, the ground beneath his feet trembled, and a loud growl echoed through the arena. James's heart leaped in his chest as a large, shadowy figure emerged from the darkness. The creature was massive, with sharp claws and glowing red eyes, its body covered in thick, armored scales. It looked like something straight out of a nightmare. Rena stepped back, giving him space. "You must fight. Show me your strength." Shh. Mind raced. He had no weapons, no training. All he had was his wits and his courage. He didn't know how he could possibly defeat this creature, but he knew he had to try. His life and the strange future that Rena had laid before him depended on it. The creature lunged at him, its claws slashing through the air. James dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the sharp talons. His heart pounded in his chest as he scrambled to his feet. He had never been in a fight like this before. He wasn't a warrior, wasn't trained for this, but he wasn't going to give up. Not now, not when so much was at stake. He ran toward the creature, using the energy of fear to push him forward. He grabbed a loose piece of metal from the ground and swung it at the creature's head. The metal hit its skull with a loud thud, but it didn't do much damage. The creature roared in anger and swiped at him again. James stumbled backward, his body aching. He had no choice but to keep fighting, to keep pushing forward. He wasn't just fighting for his life. He was fighting for the chance to control his own fate. James stumbled back, his body aching and covered in sweat. The creature had been tough, far tougher than anything he had ever faced. But somehow, he had managed to survive. He wasn't sure how. Every instinct inside him screamed to give up, but he pushed forward. Using his wits and quick thinking to outmaneuver the creature, Rena stood by the edge of the platform, her expression unreadable. She had not intervened. She had watched the entire fight with a calm intensity, as if this was exactly what she expected from him. She nodded, but didn't say a word. "You're not dead yet," she said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was still as cold as ever, but there was something in her tone that seemed to suggest approval. James, panting and covered in dirt and blood, could barely keep his eyes open. He had fought hard, but he was exhausted. The creature's claws had left deep gashes in his arms and legs, and his head was spinning from the impact of several hard blows. He felt like he was on the edge of collapse. But despite all that, there was a part of him that couldn't stop. He couldn't back down, not when there was so much on the line. "What now?" James asked, his voice hoarse. Rena's eyes gleamed. In the dim light, "You have passed the first test," she said, stepping closer. "But the second test will require more than just physical strength." James frowned, confused. What did she mean? He had just fought for his life, and now she was telling him that the next test would be different. What else did she want from him? "You will now face a different challenge," Rena continued, her voice soft but serious. "It will not be enough to fight. You will need to prove your loyalty, your ability to work with someone else, and your willingness to trust." James raised an eyebrow. "Work with someone else? What do you mean?" Rena's lips curved into a faint smile. "You will face your next test with a partner, a creature like the one you just fought. But this time you will work together with it. Your strength will only get you so far. The real test will be your ability to cooperate." James's heart skipped a beat. "You're serious? You want me to team up with one of those creatures?" Rena nodded. "Yes. You must show me that you can overcome your fears and trust in your partner, no matter how dangerous they may seem." James stared at her, his mind reeling. How was he supposed to trust a creature that had nearly killed him just moments ago? The idea of teaming up with one of them felt impossible, but then again, everything that had happened so far had felt impossible. "I'm not sure I can do that," James said, his voice filled with doubt. "How am I supposed to trust something that's trying to kill me?" Rena's gaze softened just a little. "You are not meant to trust blindly, but you must learn to work together to find common ground. Only then will you prove that you are worthy." Before James could respond, the arena around him shifted. The ground trembled, and the air hummed with energy. A door on the far side of the platform slid open, and a figure stepped through. It was another creature, much like the one James had just fought, but this one was different. Its eyes were not full of rage. Instead, there was a quiet intelligence. Behind them, as though it understood the situation. The creature was massive, with sharp claws and an imposing build. But it moved with a grace that was almost surprising. The creature approached James slowly, its gaze meeting his. James could feel his heart racing again. It wasn't just fear this time. It was something else. Was it possible to trust this creature? Was it possible to trust himself? Your new partner, Rena said, watching them both closely. This is your second test. Will you work together, or will you fight? The creature stopped a few feet away from James, its eyes never leaving him. It wasn't making any aggressive moves, but James could still sense the power within it. He didn't know how to react. The creature crouched down, lowering its head, slightly, as if waiting for James to make the first move. For a moment, there was only silence. James could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on high. His mind was racing, but there was no escape from this test. He had no choice but to face it head-on. James took a deep breath, gathering his strength. "All right," he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness in his chest. "Do this." The creature gave a low growl, and for a moment, James thought he had made the wrong choice. But then, to his surprise, the creature moved to his side, ready to work with him. It wasn't attacking, it was waiting for him to lead. James didn't know what he was doing. He had never been in a situation like this before, and the creature was still an unknown. But he knew one thing for sure. He had to trust it. He had to trust that working together was the only way out of this challenge. "Let's get this over with," James muttered, stepping forward. The creature followed him, staying close, moving as if it had some kind of understanding of what they needed to do. James could feel the bond between them, not one of friendship, but one of necessity. This was the test. Could he work with something dangerous, something unpredictable? As they moved together through the arena, James realized that there was more to this test than physical strength or fear. It was about learning to adapt, to find strength in each other's differences. It was about trusting, even when it seemed impossible. They didn't speak, but somehow, through their movements, they communicated. The creature wasn't just following him, it was helping him, guiding him in its own way. They were learning to fight as one, and for the first time since he arrived on the station, James felt a flicker of hope. Maybe he wasn't alone in this after all. The arena had quieted as James and the creature moved in sync, both of them cautiously stepping toward the center of the platform. They had faced their first challenge together, but this was just the beginning. A real test lay ahead. James was still processing what had happened. A few hours ago, he was just a man making a joke. Now he was part of something he couldn't understand, something far bigger than him. He had no choice but to trust Rena and the creature beside him. They had made it through the first part of the test, but now there was a growing tension in the air. What was coming next? Rena stood at the edge of the platform, watching them silently. Her red eyes never left James. She had remained distant throughout the entire test, offering no help, no guidance. But her gaze was intense, as though she was measuring every step they took. "You've shown your strength," Rena's voice echoed, across the arena, "but now you will face the true challenge. It is not just about fighting, nor about surviving. This test will reveal who you truly are." James felt a shiver run down his spine. He wasn't sure what Rena meant by that, but he had a feeling he was about to find out. The creature beside him seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere, its muscles tensing. It moved closer to James, its glowing eyes never leaving the center of the arena. The ground beneath them rumbled, and the walls of the arena began to glow with an eerie light. Something was coming. Without warning, the ground split open, and several large shapes emerged from the cracks. The creatures were different from the one James had fought before. They were much larger, with thick, armored skin and massive claws. That gleamed in the light. It looked like something out of a nightmare, and James felt his heart race as he took a step back. Rena's voice cut through the tension. "You will face these creatures, but you will not fight alone this time. You must rely on your partner, the one who stands by your side." James glanced at the creature beside him. It stood tall and strong, its glowing eyes locked on the new threat. For a moment, James hesitated. How was he supposed to work with this thing? It had attacked him not long ago, and now he was supposed to trust it with his life. But then he remembered. The first challenge, the way the creature had helped him without hesitation, how it had moved with him, not against him. He didn't have time to doubt. The creatures in front of him were coming closer, and he had no choice but to face them. He took a deep breath and nodded at the creature. "Let's do this," he whispered. The creature growled in response, a low, rumbling sound that sent a shiver through the air. It was ready. The first of the creatures lunged forward, its claws slashing at the ground with a terrifying speed. James barely had time to react, but the creature beside him was faster. It darted in front of James, blocking the attack with its massive arm. The force of the blow sent both the creature and James stumbling back, but they quickly regained their footing. James didn't waste any time. He grabbed a large piece of debris from the ground and hurled it at the creature's head. It made contact, but the creature barely flinched. It was much tougher than the one James had fought earlier, but the creature beside him was already moving. Again, it charged forward, its claws raking through the air as it tackled the monster to the ground. James took a step back, his eyes darting to the other creatures now surrounding them. He had to think quickly. The creature was powerful, but there were too many of them. They couldn't fight them all head-on. He needed a plan. James looked around the arena, searching for anything that could help them. He spotted a set of large, heavy crates stacked near the edge of the platform. They could use them as cover or even as weapons. They might stand a chance. He signaled to the creature, trying to communicate through gestures. The creature seemed to understand, its eyes locking with his as it nodded. Slightly, together they moved toward the crates, the creature leading the way. James grabbed one of the crates and rolled it toward the closest monster. With a quick grunt, the creature hurled the crate at the attacking beast, collided with the monster's side, throwing it off balance. The creature roared in frustration, but it was momentarily distracted, giving James and his partner an opening. "Now," James shouted. The creature surged forward, leaping onto the distracted beast's back and sinking its claws into its thick hide. Finish the fight. He grabbed another piece of debris and swung it at the creature's head, knocking it out cold. One down. But there was still more to go. James's heart was pounding, his body aching from the earlier fight, but he felt a surge of determination. He wasn't going to let this alien vampire woman win. He wasn't going to be part of some game. He would prove that he could survive, prove that he was worthy. The fight raged on, and James could feel the creature beside him moving in perfect rhythm with him. Together, they were a force to be reckoned with. They were no longer two separate beings. They were one, working together to overcome the odds. Finally, after what felt like hours, the last of the creatures fell to the ground. James and the creature stood panting, covered in dirt and sweat, but alive. Rena stepped forward, her eyes scanning the arena. She said nothing for a moment, just watched them both, her expression unreadable. Then, finally, she spoke. "You have passed," she said, her voice surprisingly soft. "You have proven your strength, your ability to trust, and your willingness to fight together. You are ready for the final test." James barely had time to process what she was saying before she turned and walked toward the exit, leaving him standing in the middle of the arena with the creature beside him. He had made it this far. But what came next? What was the final test? James stood in the center of the arena, his body sore from the fights he had just endured. The air was thick with tension as he caught his breath, trying to steady his racing heart. He and the creature had just finished fighting off several terrifying monsters, and now they were standing victorious. But that victory felt hollow. There was no time to celebrate. Rena, the alien vampire woman, had already moved on to the next phase of her challenge. Rena stood across the arena watching them with her piercing red eyes. There was no smile on her face, no hint of approval. She was waiting, judging. James had passed the first two tests, but she hadn't spoken a word of praise. The silence was deafening and made his nerves flare up again. The creature beside him was still catching its breath, its chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. It had helped him survive the challenge, but now they both had to face the unknown. What was the final test? James had no idea, and he couldn't help but feel uneasy. Every part of him wanted to escape, but he knew he couldn't. Not now. He had to finish what he started. Rena's voice broke the silence. "You have passed the trials of strength and loyalty," she said, her words cold and measured. "But there is one more thing you must prove." James's stomach twisted. "What's left?" he asked, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "You must prove that you are worthy of the power that comes with being my mate," Rena replied, her gaze unwavering. "You must decide whether you are willing to change, to accept a new life. A life that will come with responsibilities you cannot understand. You must decide if you are ready to leave your old life behind." James took a step back, his heart sinking. What was she asking? Leave his old life behind. What did that even mean? "I've already proven my strength," he said, trying to make sense of her words. "What do you want from me?" Rena's eyes narrowed, her gaze never leaving him. "The final test is not about strength. It is about choice. You must choose to leave behind your old life and accept the new one. Will you walk the path I offer you, or will you reject it?" James stared at her, feeling a wave of confusion wash over him. This wasn't what he had expected. He had thought the tests were about surviving, about physical strength and courage. But now Rena was talking about something else entirely, something much deeper. The creature beside him growled softly, its eyes flicking toward him. James realized that this wasn't just about him. This was about his future, his destiny. Was being asked to make a decision that would change everything? "Why me?" James asked, his voice quiet. "Why did you choose me for this?" Rena didn't answer right away. She simply watched him, her eyes calculating, waiting. Finally, she spoke. "I chose you because you were different. You were strong, yes, but you also have the courage to change. You are willing to adapt to a new world, to accept things that others would reject. You have the potential to become something more. But you must choose, James. Will you accept your fate, or will you walk away?" James felt the weight of her words settle in his chest. This wasn't just a simple choice. This was a decision that would shape the rest of his life. He had come to this space station, looking for something more, but now he had to decide if he was willing to accept the consequences of that search. He glanced at the creature beside him. It was still breathing heavily, its eyes watching him with a kind of understanding. For the first time, James realized that he wasn't alone in this. He had made it through the tests with the creature by his side, and together they had survived. But was that enough? Was he really ready to give up everything for something he didn't fully understand? "I don't know if I can make that choice," James said honestly, his voice shaky. "This is all so new to me. I didn't ask for this. I didn't ask for any of it." Rena's gaze softened, just slightly. No one ever does. But sometimes we are chosen for things we don't understand. You've already proven that you can survive. Now, you must prove that you can accept what comes next. James stood there in the center of the arena, feeling the weight of her words pressing down on him. He wasn't sure if he was ready, but he had come this far and there was no turning back now. He had made it through the physical tests and now he had to face the emotional challenge, the choice that would determine his future. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to clear his thoughts. This was the hardest decision he had ever faced. But deep down, he knew he couldn't walk away. Couldn't reject the possibility of something new, something beyond what he had ever known. When he opened his eyes, he looked at Rena. "I'll accept it," he said, his voice firm. "I don't know what's ahead, but I'm ready to face it." Rena studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded, a small but approving gesture. "Very well. You have made your choice. Now the final step will begin." James felt a rush of uncertainty, but also a strange sense of relief. He had chosen his path, and now there was no turning back. Whatever came next, he would face it with the creature by his side and with the knowledge that he had accepted the challenge that Rena had placed before him. The air in the arena felt thick with anticipation as James stood, waiting for Rena to speak. His decision was made, but the weight of it still hung heavily on his shoulders. It wasn't easy to make a choice that would shape his future, but he knew it was the right one. He had walked through the fire, fought side by side with a creature he never thought he could trust, and come out alive. But now, he was faced with the biggest question of all. What came next? Rena's eyes studied him carefully, and for the first time, he saw something in her gaze that wasn't just cold calculation. There was a hint of approval, maybe even respect. She didn't smile, but there was a quiet pride in the way she looked at him. "You have made your choice," she said, her voice low but firm. "Now, you will understand what it means." James took a deep breath, still unsure of what was coming. He had chosen to accept his fate, to leave behind his old life, and embrace whatever Rena had in mind for him. But he wasn't sure what that would mean. Was he ready for whatever lay ahead? Was he truly prepared to step into a new life with all its unknowns? Rena moved toward him, her steps graceful and confident. She stopped just in front of him, her eyes never leaving his. "Are not the same person who arrived here," she said. "You have proven your strength, your courage, and your willingness to change. You are no longer just a man from a distant station. You are now something more." James felt a twinge of confusion. "Something more?" he echoed, unsure of what she meant. "You are one of us now," Rena said, her voice steady. "You will walk with us, live with us, and fight with us. Your strength will be tested again and again, but you will never face it alone. The bond between you and me, between you and this world, has been forged. You are no longer just a human. You are part of something greater." James stared at her, still processing her words. I had known this journey wouldn't be easy, but he hadn't expected it to be this big, to be part of something greater. What did that even mean? He had come here as a joke, had fought for survival, but now he was part of a world he didn't fully understand. "Is this the final step?" James asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Is this my future?" Rena nodded. "Yes, this is your future, James. This is the path you have chosen." He looked over at the creature that had been his partner in the arena. It stood there, still as ever, but now James saw it differently. It wasn't just a creature to fight alongside. It was part of this new life, a life that he had decided to embrace. They were in this together, and James knew, deep down, that they would face whatever challenges came next as a team. The creature gave a low growl, sound of approval, and James couldn't help but smile. It was a small moment, but it felt like a step forward. Rena turned away from him and walked toward the exit of the arena. "Come," she said, her voice commanding. "It is time to leave this place behind." James followed her, walking alongside the creature. He didn't look back at the arena, at the place where everything had changed. It was behind him now. As he walked, he felt the weight of the decision lift from his shoulders, replaced by a sense of purpose he hadn't known he had. Whatever this new life held, he was ready for it. As they stepped through the door that led out of the arena, James saw the vast expanse of the world beyond. It was unlike anything he had seen before. The sky was dark, but the stars were brighter. Here, the air was thick with the scent of alien plants, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to hum with energy. This wasn't a station anymore. This was a living, breathing world. "You are home now," Rena said, her voice softer this time. "This is where you belong." James stopped for a moment, taking in the sight of the world around him. Come here not knowing what to expect. He'd come as a stranger, unsure of his place. But now, as he looked at the vast, unfamiliar landscape, he felt a strange sense of belonging. He wasn't just a man from a far-off space station anymore. He was part of something greater, something that stretched beyond the stars. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time he felt ready to face it. With one last look at the alien world before him, James turned to Rena. "What now?" he asked. Rena smiled, a small, knowing smile. "Now you begin your new life. There's much to learn, much to experience. You will train, you will fight, and you will grow. But no matter what happens, you will never be alone." James felt a sense of peace settle over him as he nodded. He had made his choice. And now, he was ready for whatever came next.